좀 던데 공부 자오라야 라장 자로 건거 로주 점니 점저니다 남다라서위 전예 동거 점저주제니 제다가라론 간다 제비 저러 마르만도 등으로 주서위 조조가라워저 야라 주제 양도좀 루드르제 조뇨 모뇨로리 제저도 좀자 마르만서 등으로 녀거 전예 점저라저노 돈에 다장삽진다서 연달리 조제제도 조조조도 전이 잔들달로 문제는 장으로 연란다도 마라바자나도 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 마라바자 마라바자나도 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 마라바자 마라바자나도 쯔든 지짐제노 오즈르지 달로담만바라선 과당 담주 종로 도바이 로주 베나와 제도스로 용지 진보 zordan 메자 존에 몰음 진보 나디아 바크라 다랑 잔두 셔머도 톰바드제 잔라 샹자로 와야 되니 남바 탐실라
Good evening to everybody here tonight. And our teaching is going to begin now. And before we begin with the teaching this evening, everybody please make an aspiration of bodhicitta with which to listen to it. So all of us here this evening are practitioners of the Mahayana teachings, the Mahayana path. And in terms of the Mahayana teachings, the greatest emphasis is on bodhicitta. The benefits of cultivating bodhicitta are truly inconceivable, and if we're able to truly cultivate it within ourselves, then there is no other merit or virtue or positive action that we can possibly accomplish in this lifetime that could surpass this.
Shitante la panyon yu yorete, gewa kangdang kangdum na panyon yorete, yin na yang, shangship kusim de me tsarti, tani gewa kangay na, tani jachimbo ta lapchimbo, tani yung guna, te yung pe kakpore.
So, without a motivation of bodhicitta, or without bodhicitta, even though we may do kora, we may recite mantras, we may do prostrations and things like this, without bodhicitta, then these positive acts, which of course do have merit and benefit in themselves, will not be able to reach a great and vast level of merit.
Tani shangchip ka simti tani karte yakbozu yosona, tani soso rang matsindi tola, tani tsuwa yana matsi tsuwa anda tani tsuwa dehke dang damba, tani kyabarda tani sim ga nangla tani dehke ka tani nangwa jachimbo yongken, tani tsuwa tani kirchokore.
By cultivating strong bodhicitta, it is possible in this life to really generate for oneself a strong sense of happiness, particularly a strong sense of happiness in one's mind.
Teni tetang nyamda, nga tso shangchip ka semte yakbozo yona, teni mi jamba halipa nga mi mangbo ta, teni mi mayin na pe na, teni chokchak tandro yin na, tetsu mi mangbo ta semchim mangbo la, teni pamba jachimbo teni tokore.
And in addition to this, with bodhicitta, we are not just able to do great benefit for other human beings, but are also able to benefit in a great way other beings, such as animals.
Tendi yendi teni ngacho yenda manda teni shanship ko sim de gela ke atamatab teni ta gore ta gewa ngacho gewa shetang gewa la mangbo yore gewa la teni gewa develop pe mangbo re te yena ti nane zo ngacho sim ko tone gewa debati pe karchim bore.
So it's for this reason that we really need to strive to cultivate bodhicitta. There are many ways of accumulating merit. There are many kinds of positive action that we can engage in. However, the most meritorious and the most positive of these is cultivating merit in our minds.
Tani sim ko tone gewa yakpo zo teni yong tsari jini tani ta zo ngacho khagndom ba ta laba ga dwya Tegore mato badene ngacho sim gatola teni samba yakbo zamyo me shamnyang ji me tendi yen charti teni ngacho khagndom ba mambondo yanda ta teni lipo kora jawe yanda ta ndoso kortela gewa yo marise na yore gewa yo marise ge yo mar yore te yena gesa chungchung mato yo mare.
So only after we've really been able to cultivate merit at the level of our minds should we really then begin doing recitations and kora and things like this. Because without a positive, a strong motivation, and without loving kindness and compassion, then our actions such as reciting mantras and doing kora, etc., will not be able to be considered extremely meritorious or extremely positive in nature.
Tati indi shanship ko semzeate kandiz la zegrezena ndor dini teni tsangmala ngortu shekayin.
So what is it that we actually mean by bodhicitta? I'd just like to explain this briefly.
Shanship ji semzena teni tamja zreze tamja ni reze tamja ni tamja kilin yana simtak chat simtak tsangchet or teni ni reze.
So what bodhicitta essentially is two vows or two resolves that we make.
Teni tambote kare tamja tambote kare zena teni ngarang yeze ta ngarangi tartani zong matsin dedang teni matsin de chupo mayimba teni kewa shima dang shima decho nangla teni ngarang leka kang le zena teni nge simshin tamchit yar teni tarwa toya simchin tamchilla teni kirganang chego teni dungur meba o teni leka zange dribko yin samne sosorang ka tamja shi gore simtak cha gore te tamja tambores.
So what is the first of these vows or resolves? The first vow is that from now on, from this point onwards, for the rest of this life and indeed in future lives to come, that we will engage in the work of liberating all beings, eliminating their suffering or the sufferings of cyclic existence. And it's making this resolve or making this vow that is the first promise of bodhicitta.
Teni tamja nipati gangrezena tangacho simjin tamche teni tarwa toya simjin tamchu teni ta kega nanche dungur meba tenji ge lekazle gona ngacho mi sherdang ge music le thab ge mare te indi ta thapsi gandhi gorezena ta ngacho indama ngacho sangji gore garti ngarancho teni sangji shatya tapandra o teni zre sona teni ngacho yin rambo la teni simjin ge ton dribna drib chokore teni simjin ge ton ja chimbun drib gore te indi teni ngarang yindamada ngarang sangji go samne ngarang ka sangji drib ko yin sambi teni tamja ni ba she go gore teni ti tamja ti ni kala teni shanship ko simze gore.
And the second promise or the second vow of the bodhicitta motivation is, since we have determined to work for the liberation of all beings and for the elimination of their sufferings in cyclic existence, we recognize that this is not something an ordinary person is capable of doing, and that in order for us to engage in this work to the best of our abilities, we need to first attain Buddhahood. And so in attaining Buddhahood, it will be possible for us to work for the benefit of other beings in a long-term and effective way. So therefore, we resolve to attain Buddhahood of necessity ourselves, and it is this second vow or undertaking that forms the second promise of the bodhicitta aspiration.
Tani kantar ngaso tari mogli ndis ngaso sama thobyo re te yona ngaso mtsinde tini korkpe yakboz reze tari ngaso tini mog tini lipon ndis thobyo ate pe korkpe yakboz rendose te indi tini korkpe tini yakboz yenna tini ngaso kanji guni tini korkpe tamzen yakboz she gore te karte ngaso tinala leka yakboz le mathap tini rena tini ngaso korkpe yakboz yore ta yenna korkpe para shor gore tindi indi mi soso go samlo tane ta nga tari mali ndi yak bozu thopsung te na tini ngarang ka mali te tondang damba tini nyambo dang damba o tindi su che gona nge leka kare ko sare kane le na ga sare samni sama samlo tang go ya tindi zre.
So all of us have obtained a human body or a human form in this lifetime. And this represents a very good opportunity. However, in fact, we need to give consideration to how it is that we use this opportunity. Just having the opportunity but not using it in a positive way is equivalent to not making the most or losing the opportunity. Having this human rebirth, having this human form, we need to give thought as to what is the way that we can make the most of this opportunity to use this human life of ours in the most meaningful and purposeful way.
Teni ngaso mi mamboz ka samlo tana ngaso tarta yenna teni shusoko thola mi mamboz ka teni ta ngarang la teni nipa mandusam teni ngarang la teni rentang mad ngarang kan chuwa la rentang mad ngarang ka chechok la rentang mad teni ngarang teni manjung khen ton mathung khen rentang men khen ga mo teni zre samne teni mi mambo semkham ga nala teni kyun jigni teni samde ga yores rete yinna yang ka te ngaso mbachum shina te ngaso me susola ma chama la teni kork yore teni te chu tone shana ngaso thaba chimbo tone shana me susola kork pe yabu yore teni yendi o nga dbore ngin jong ga mare nga rentang me pare samne teni chawane teni samnyang ga mare ngaso muli tamjur ki muli zerante thobyo teni mi chama ga cheto te pe hale ba rentang dang dam ba da kork bio ba teni zre.
Many people in society these days regard themselves as not having any value, not having any particular function or power, being ineffective, being untalented, not being of any worth. This sense of one's life not being of any value is a prevalent idea that many people have. However, with diligence, with hard work, from the point of view of the Mahayana teachings, then everybody has an opportunity. It is by no means can we think or should we think that our life is meaningless without value or without any potential. From the point of view of the Dharma, so long as we have this human life form, this human rebirth, then we all have the opportunity to use it in a most excellent way. All of us have lives of extreme value.
ndonla ngaso ngolla tani lamkha mamboz yore ngaso la damkha hale ba mamboz yore de yendi ngaso nangchu nangla yana namgin ngaso mi li zeate mi li te hale ba thupka boyo zeni tini sonde yore te yobi gimsen de kare zena ngaso mli te tini thupka wa yimbi gimsen de kare zena gimsen ka tsawa ngomade te ngaso karte mli ze tini thup sona ngaso la damkha hale ba mamboz yore soso rang damkate kang sina teni chokore soso sanji thumna chokore teni soso te maimbi teni kang she samna teni te damka mambo yore di gimsen ji nga so mli te pe teni thopkaware ji teni song yore.
In front of us, presented before us, are many potential pathways that we can follow. And in Buddhism, having this human rebirth is regarded as something rare and is regarded as something precious. And the reason for this, the basic and fundamental reason that we do regard a human rebirth as so precious and so rare is on account of the many choices that we have as humans. We have the choice to work towards attaining Buddhahood. We have choices in respect of pursuing all kinds of activity. And so it's for this reason primarily that we regard this human form as extremely rare and precious.
Tani karte nga tsu muskila sanlo tambaye na nga tsu tani tarti nga tsu tsuwa nga la pena zamaza ya komba kyonya tani khamba chimbo nga la tani nduya tani raz mahto ba jamba nga tsu la tani damnga mena tele jambi tani damnga mena tani malite yang tani halepa thofka ya tani rize goya chiji ya mares.
However, if we think about it from the point of view of an average human, if our only choices were to, in respect of eating food or living in a nice apartment or things like this, then we didn't have any choices beyond pursuing these kinds of things, then there would be no reason particularly for us to regard our human forms as particularly rare and precious.
Tani nga tso perna soso go tani ze zama jimbo zaya ta komba yakpo kyonya tinjin rapo ta nga tso mi ina nga tso mogon sowa ga na la tani to ta zama zaya komba kyonya nso soso la dewa ter ke yore tin rapo so tani chokchak jamba chola yang khorang so ngarang so ta na khorang so zama te nga tso zana jimbo yo mari ta yena khorang chola khorang so tani chowa te khorang chola tani khorang ga dewa te ter ke yore tinjin ra zama to ba nga tso moschila 돈도 내려 tindichi mena nga so chokchak dan rabo tendro dan rabo ma to ba kyachu mi na kyachu chi me ba tindichi ndore masela rantang chimboz yoze gona tamchin randan da ndore rabo re kres.
So if we are talking about these kinds of things, such as eating delicious food and wearing nice clothes and things like this, and the kinds of happiness that they generate for us, well, we might look at other animals, and even though their food, the things that they consume, might not be particularly delicious from our point of view, to the animals in question, these things are delicious and they produce kinds of happiness relative to the animals. So we might say that without any other pursuits beyond things like obtaining delicious food and nice clothes and other material things, that there really isn't much difference between ourselves and other animals, and that there is really not much greater value in having a human life form.
Teni jiting ka pena nga so teni ngubo longshut pena gurmo yenare khangba yenare langkhor yenare teni zaya kyoya teso ngubo ndo so tsama kangdang kang yenanda teni nga so la partak rambo yo nga so la tindi me nga so la tindi longshut ki me pena nga so la gurmo me teni nga so la khangba me nga so la langkhor me pandaw tindi partak rambo yo pi kapsa teni nga so ina ngarang la gurmo mambozio na ngape kebo injiri samba ngarang la khamba chimbozo na deni ngarang pe kebo injiri tele jamba nga chichi go mare samba ndo tendi go samlo te tini yungu yores.
So in our worldly lives, in terms of material objects and material enjoyments, whether they be money or food or clothes or the kinds of apartments or dwellings we live in, when we exist in a way where there is a large distance between where we currently are and the state where we enjoy these things. So when we don't have money or when we don't live in a nice apartment, then we commonly think that, oh, if I only had lots of money, then I would be happy. Or if only I had a nice apartment, then I would be happy. We often think that we would need nothing beyond these things in order to feel happy.
Tani nga tsugon sowa nga la nga tsu mi tini semkham de kanri zare zena nga tsun sowa nga la kang me na me pa te tini nga rang so yo na nga hali pa ke po yong gore samni tini sam go yore yo pa te so yo charwi jini tini nga tsu te la tini jemba me pa o tini gawa me pa tini jen ro gore se pe na nga so gang in na nga rang so me pa ti tang bo nga so sem ka na la o te nga la yo na te ni nga rang ki bo yong gore sam de tin di sam gore ri te in na ni ma chi la nguni khorang la ti yo so na te ni yo so na ti jini oda khorang te sam ga mari ti jini ngu bo te la te ni kale margawa sem ka na la ti ni ndo pa me pa gawa me pa tin di ren ro yo re te nga chun ro mi sim gu chuni te tin di zre.
So, in terms of human psychology, we might say that anything we don't currently possess, we think is capable of bringing us happiness. But in terms of the things that we do have, or when we do finally obtain things, very quickly we reach a state where we no longer feel any particular attachment to them, or we no longer find them particularly interesting or desirable. So to begin with, we think that once achieving or obtaining these things, we would certainly feel happy. However, on the day that we do actually come into possession of these things, they no longer are such a source of interest and desire for us. And this pattern is really a natural pattern of human nature.
다 딘디 인디 nga chola tini goya ngoma the countries rizina nga chun chowa ga na la yopi tini nga so tini chowa ga na la yopi ngupun do so ma tok ba yamba nga rang chola tini don de nyeria tindi ra me sona tini nga so mali ina ran thang dang dam ba rezina ma rezina tindi ra bo re tini nga so on chowa ga na na yo pan de ma tok ba yamba nga so la don de nyeria chi me na tini me chama ga ina tini so so ngune tang ne so so me che ga ran thang de gana yo
So if beyond these things we didn't have any other kinds of pursuits, then it would be difficult to say that these lives of ours are rare and precious. And beyond these kinds of things, many people don't know what other kinds of pursuits in fact are.
nga cho mche ge tini chu muir ta ngarang ge mche ge tini muir tin de yin samban rao tin ris tini nga cho samala yo go yo re tini yo go na te nga cho ramban thumbu rao tin ri ge muir tin ris yo sona pe na nga cho tini za je da gyong ji da ngu po da de chu kyang ba ma yin ba te le te chum thumbu rao tin ri muir yo sona tini nga cho muir ti to la tini ba chun she na tini mche te ton dang dam ba tini re yong re.
So it's for this reason that we need to identify a main pursuit or a clear purpose in our lives. This is something that we all need to identify, and best if we make it a high-level kind of purpose or a high-level pursuit. So if in addition to achieving things like delicious food and nice clothes and other kinds of material enjoyments, we have a higher goal or a purpose that is somewhat higher than this, then our lives can become extremely meaningful and purposeful.
Tani nga zo perna debi lorgi ge tholai na lo tongchak chik tendi ge yarngon la tani mi cho tani tartan ra bo tani che leka mambole go ta trera chimbo tani ya mare te me pi gimsen ji tani mi cho tani so so rang mche ge tani rentang de kangin dang tani mche ge muir de kang ri zin go de chu thola mi cho samlo mambo tang yo re mambo tang wi ti ji ti jimri de kang re zina tani zambalang ga sharta navla tani pernan chanyer ba tani mi mche ge tani chanyer ba korla yana tani haliba yargi tani shong yo re tendra boz ke chulug yana yo zambalang ga tani sharta navla tani chi chulug tani mambo garter tani lo tongcha mambo rang la tani mo jarton chumb mambo la tani shikin tem ga tani chulug yana tani mambo tani xartu shine tani she tab yo re tika ko moti cho yana e ko ran cho tani gyang bo la ta tab ko yo re tani tang zammo la ta tab ko yo re mchi go mu yer ti gyang bo la ko so samlo tang tab ko yo re.
So if we look at past history, say, the past 1,000 years or so, this was a time where people were by no means as busy as they are today. And so for this reason, they had much greater scope to contemplate the purpose of human existence and the value of human existence. And the result of this contemplation were developments in the life sciences, in religion, religious traditions in both the East and the West. And so people in their thousands and hundreds of thousands were able to give deep contemplation to the purpose of life in a very long-range and profound sense.
Tani tartayana nga tsu tsangma tani ngubo go thola samlo tani ngubo yarje go thola samlo tani ti thola mbachun mambo shi tinti shi jati tani musoso la titsu yang mambo yo mare tenda bozu ko musoso go tani mche go tani ton la samlo tang zaboda gyang rambo tinti tang thab go yo mare tang yi tinti ko samlo tang ya go khomba yang yo mare tini mi tsangma te nga so perna ji ungbo mambo thorki shia ga tini churchan ra bo reni tini tinti reni nga so samlo go chati mar jenyam landro tini z tartan ra bo na nga so tini sowa de tini z renro yo res.
So these days, however, the situation is one where we are primarily preoccupied with material development and material progress, and it's in respect of this that we are diligent and work hard. As a result, we don't have much time and not much time to contemplate deeply and in a long-term sense or in a long-term way the purposes and value of human existence. We simply don't have the time to do so. So from this point of view, in terms of the contemplative aspect of our lives, this has become increasingly weak or increasingly less.
Tindi yimbi jimtsenji tini nga tsu matsendi nang la ta suso go teni samlo te zi tang ni suso ranga nguni tang ni nga rang la goya teni nga rang la pan thoya nga rang tini matse chikpo go nang la tonyir shi na teni kari te tonyir shi na teni tonyir shi na riksari rintang yo sari sambi tindi go suso ranga sem go nang la rintang ka tawa zi manta ina nga tsu inda manta yo go ndik ma to ba nga tsu gormo sa ya chikpo uchi ji yong ma re si muzglam chona.
So it is really necessary in this life that we give proper thought to the questions of what it is we really need, what it is that will be able to truly benefit us. If we are going to spend our whole lives in pursuit or striving to achieve certain goals, what is it that we should be striving for? What is it that is of value to us? And this necessarily must be something that is not simply limited to accumulating money and material things.
Tani nga tsu sim ga nang la nga rang rang ga mtse ga tini mo yer ndayin samba ra o tini zi me na tani nga tsu mo tsama ga sim ga nang tongba re mi sim ga nang la tongba re mi sim ga nang tongba yin di tani nga tsu shilo ko tini ngubo kandi yo na yang tini sim ga nang la demo tang kepo me tani kandi go ne chowa kandi ke go na yang ha ma ko tani shi tani shopa de nga so kandi shi na tani nga so go gunshut shopa de kandi shi na tani yabu yong yo da de so tani ha ma ko ni tani mi mambo tani sim kham ga na la nat jam mambo thibni tani zambolong ko thola te nat de so chemang lan ro yo ris tarta.
So without a clear idea of what one's purpose in life is, then one becomes empty, one feels extremely empty. And in this situation, no degree of external material possessions is capable of bringing happiness. Without any happiness, people don't understand how to live their lives. They don't know how to conduct themselves properly, how to act and how to behave. As a result, many people develop illnesses and psychological problems, and indeed in the world today, psychological problems are very much on the increase.
Tani tati ola nga tsu nangbaz tini yimbi wanda shina, nga tsu nangba sanji baga tini chunyamlin shinkin tini zi yinna, tani kandiz gore nga te zi ngo tu shik yin.
So, as Buddhists ourselves, as practitioners of the Buddha Dharma, how is it that we should go about our lives? This is something that I would like to talk on briefly.
Tani nga tsu nangbazi yinna, tani zambolonga shar yinnari, naw yinnari, ti nangla, ta onatun halipa chimbo tani chigyores, tani nga tsu nangbaz nangla, onatun chishu chigyores.
So, as Buddhists, whether by this we are referring to Buddhists in the East and the West, actually among Buddhists everywhere there is one particularly serious problem, one problem that you might say has become the biggest problem we're facing.
Tani natun chishu ti kangrezi na nga tsu nangba tani loma soze gonanda, nga tsu nangba tani chupa tso, tani chula lojung sheyade, lojung shinkende, pe nyung reze, nga so pe nyung re, teni te nyung yinbi gemsenji, teni nga so mambo zaka teni chu ngoma te kandi yen ma yinda, teni kandi go ni nyamlin she go, teni kandi go ni gom gyab go, nga so nangba zi na tawa te kandi go re, teni gomba te kandi go re, shopa te kandi go re, sama mi mambo hako yo ma re.
And this problem, the problem that I'm speaking of is that Buddhist students of the Buddha Dharma, or practitioners or believers, however you might put it, are not studying the Dharma. They're not studying the Dharma of the Buddhist the content of the Dharma, and as a result, they don't know how to discern true Dharma from that which is not. They don't know how to go about practice, they don't know how to go about meditation, they don't know how to establish the correct view or the correct conduct or the correct meditation.
Tani nga tsu nangba ka tata leka kari lega yorizina, tani mang chi shuti tindi rizi nga tsu gomba shikla san lo tangpa yana, gomba ka nala tsoba mangbo tani tsoyata, tani gomba ka nala nzikchen mangbo tani chiyanda wota, tani gomba ka nala tindi leka tindi mangbo lega re, tani nga tsu boba ka tani chuyi nare, te chuluk jamba nare, mangbo ka tandi shi degandu, tani te la teni, tani nga tsu mi mangbo zika, ta chuluk ziya tani nga tsu susu gomba ka nala ndoni, tani pudro yanda ta, chobambar yanda ta, shangtsar yanda ta, yana susu un suwa ka tola tani, natun dan chapi nekabna, tani sangye la tani rewa chani, tani ngarang la tani yakbozu yongya zini, tani soran de pandao, tani zinsare esamni, tani chute tani zinsare esamni nga su samgayores.
So in the situation in many monasteries and temples is that great emphasis is put on convening religious assemblies and festivals and other external aspects of the temples and monasteries. This is the case in in Tibet. It's the case in traditions elsewhere. And so for this reason, many people have the idea that practicing Buddhism or doing Buddhism essentially entails going to a monastery, making incense offerings of other kinds, doing prostrations, or alternatively, when they encounter some mishaps or difficulties in life, going to the temple and praying before the Buddha. This is what many people come to think being a Buddhist entails.
Tani sharshokla tani bobaga chu yinare, chuluk jamba yinare, tani teso tsama tani lo tongchak yanchuk tani storjin liksor pe yin rambo re. Tani ti yin rambo tani re tsawi kapsa, tani nga tso gomba tso yinare, tani chusok yinare, teso tsama nangla tani yin rambo tani rinjowi kapsa, tani nangla mususogo samlonda munda mambo ti nangla yongne, tani misosogo lelu, leka lelukta tani tsoban solu tani mambo yongni tani kale nga tsu tsoban mambo tsoya data tani shisola zigbo shiya da tani matokba nangla nga tsu tani lojong shiya data tani ti gom nyamlin shiya da tezi pe kumbo tani chagayore zi sharshokla.
So in the East, in Asia, in the Tibetan tradition as well as in traditions in other places, because we have a 1,000-year-long religious tradition, many ideas and practices in monasteries and in society have become such where great emphasis is put on rituals, convening assemblies, the external appearance of the monastery, and so forth. And in fact, the number or the emphasis that is put on study and meditation has become very much less.
Tani navshokla nga chu nangchu tarne tani yin rambo mare zita yin rambo re mare tani navshok sacha khashila nga chu tata sarwa shini tani targe yore tani yinna tani navshokla nga chu sanji ga tani chuti tarwi kaps tani sanji khorang ga tani samlo ngoman rabu shini tarthuna te peyak boris.
The Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, has not been spread in the West for a particularly long time. In some areas, you might say that the Buddha Dharma is quite new to the West. So in meeting the West, in being disseminated to the West, it is important that it be done in a way that looks to the real ideas and values at the core of the Buddha Dharma.
Yang nga chu perna Lonyung chogon nangla teni rigne ge chizum thombo yinken da lonyung go nangla teni nangchula lojong shinken jemang la teni ro yore teni tisu korti tambo lojong shipi nekmni ngaso teni ti chungoma de teni sanji chumden de khona rang ge teni chungoma de gandri yin tani teni te khorang teni lojong shi thamna teni ngaso sem go tokla phan yakbo thogore shusok la teni phan yakbo thogore mijan la phan thogore khorig la phan thogore
in terms of young people with relatively good levels of education, the number who are engaging in study of the Dharma is actually on the increase. And if these young people, when they come to the study of the Dharma, are able to study authentic, genuine Dharma that was taught by the Buddha, this will be of great benefit not only to their minds but also to society, to others, to the environment. In fact, everyone and everything will be benefited by this.
Tani ngaso sabshong mambola ngaso pena gomba yenare yana ti chuso yenare tiso tini laglin la tabya tiso nangla tani yang misoso rang tini do patar to she jaga matok ba tini sanjib chumdende sanji shakta ba khorang rang tini gomba tini khorang rang tini leka lelik te maimbi tini te leka lelik tini khemsar mambu yore tiso korati te inda mandam gerchu gyab gore matok pa te gerchu gyab matok tendi te mambo resona tini sherta ngasu chula lojong shega tiso mambo yo mare tini tiso tezi yo ati tiso na la tang jagna te ngasu nguni tangne ga tini gom gyawe anda ta lojong shega tiso tsawani tiso me parin ro.
So in many places, whether it be in monasteries or in wider society, there are many who are practicing or promoting Buddhism according to their own views. They are not doing so according to the doctrines of the Buddha or the practices of the Buddha. And this is something that very much needs to be changed. If not, given the fact that we don't have too much time to apply to our study and practice, if our time is concentrated on these incorrect practices, then our study and our meditation will not come to much.
Tani sargi ge choose ati kandi zrezina tani khorang tani malak chachambo yongkhen ge tindi ge lopso da tani laglin la tani depi thapshi tindi zrezi sargi ge choose ati khorang malak chachang yore te malak chachang te na lopso yore tani lopso ti tani ripi jonglik chi boz mare khorang laglin la tani devya ge thapshi yore tindi ge tani malak chachang wa chen tindi zre te yendi tela nga chu lojong she go re ma to pa tani lojong ma shi na ngarang chon domban do ya chik po tang tani pu do ya tani ze ka chawa ni sangje ge chula lojong ze ge mare chu nyamlin te chawa ni ze ge mare.
So in terms of the Buddha Dharma, it represents a complete system of education, a comprehensive system of education, one that includes methods of practice in addition to theory. So it is a comprehensive system that, yes, is not just theory, it's not just intellectual ideas, but also contains a complete set of methods as to how to put these teachings into practice. So for this reason, if we simply recite mantras and make incense offerings and things like this, then we are really not truly practicing the Buddha Dharma.
Tani ngacho ta tinti indi malak cha changwa ga tani loso tinti indi tela ngacho lojong te ji go re tani lojong she go na nyamling kapsa tani ngacho tondak sim go tola samlo tang go ndu se ngacho merkya phomo ngacho khimba ga tani chu nyamling shin kan tinti ji na tondak sim go tola samlo tang go re tani sim te ga re jina thuba da samba da gomba jine te so sim go tola samlo tang go ndu.
So since it is a complete and comprehensive system of study and practice, as lay practitioners, as lay Buddhists, there are three main things that we need to pay attention to. And this threefold formula is the listening or hearing the Buddhist teachings, contemplating or reflecting on them, and meditating or practicing them.
Teni tenji indi teni tomar tubaze ya de gangre zena ngaso ti chunyen go gore lojong she go gore ze pena ngaso terang ra poina de ngaso ungus teni lobchit je teni tenji go teni lobchit la nyang go gore teni tenji go korko biona tenyang go gore ka te tenji go korko mena teni ngaso teni jawa go tola nyan na teni zambalang go teni lama suso teni te songbi teni chuchen mambo nyayandu teni ngaso pork gonandu inji ka gona yore yarkat gona yore teni vednam dan so kala kansam yo jire teni indi mambo ndu jawa ga tola lojong she mambo ndu te yindam da ngaso lojong she gondu.
So firstly, the first of these three important things, or the first of this threefold formula, is listening or hearing. And what we mean by this is studying the Buddhist teachings, hearing the Buddhist teachings. So tonight we have an actual in-person teaching. We're listening to this. If opportunities like this present themselves, then we should attend, we should listen. And if they don't, then on the internet there are many teachings by different lamas in different languages, Tibetan, English, Chinese, and probably also to some extent in Vietnamese as well. So it is very important that we do listen to and make the most of these teachings.
Teni ni pa de ngaso samba je gre samba je ya de ngaso teni chu nang la teni song yo wa te so la samlo mambo tang go re shaba mambo tang go re te tenji je ta mari tenji te ngarang ga samlo te ngarang ga ko wa te nur ndu ta mandu sa ni samlo mambo tang go re teni Tesum dang, toba dang, tesum mambu yo na, teni jiji kyong go mari ze pena nga cho nang chu go ze na, o ti kyarang chula toba shinyan go mari, chula tesum yo na nzhig mari, teni nang chula teni toba go ni zhiva mambu go na nzhig mari, ti sawa ne ze go mari, teni kyarang toba mambu yo na yak bori, tesum mambu yo na yak bori, teni kyarang nang chu go nang la, teni yopi teni chu le gimri yin nari, tse ngapshi yin na, yana tongba yin yin na, tesu korwa tila zhiva mambu go ni, teni xiaba mambo tangna teni peyak bori ti xiaba ti sola teni kyarang shirp ti yarjin ro gore zini teni song yore teni indi te chu tonla te samlo mambo tangya te tondak pe karchim bori te ni pare nga chu te la samlo tang gore.
So the second of the threefold formula is contemplation or reflection on the content of the Buddhist teachings. And here it's really stressing that it's important for us to think deeply about and examine the content of the teachings, to think about whether or not they are correct, to consider whether or not our understanding of them is mistaken or not, to give rise to doubts and questions. And in fact, giving rise to many doubts and questions is in fact a good thing. By no means does Buddhism say that we are not allowed to doubt its doctrines, or that we are not allowed to have questions in respect of them. Indeed, we can, and it's very good if we do. So in respect of doctrines like karmic cause and consequence, the existence of past and future lives, the doctrine of emptiness, etc., it's important that we examine these things very closely and that we do give rise to doubts and questions. By doing so, we will increase and advance in our wisdom. So this second stage of the threefold formula, contemplating and reflecting on the teachings, is very important.
Tani yang aso mutsi di nangla yang susu tani yang dengar mambo kabar tu sim ko tola tani dengar ramana mambo yung yore madam miwar ka tani jera yenare yang na madam miwar ka tani sewa ta yang na madam miwar ka khungcho ta tani khunzin otte sola tani susu ko tani sim ko nangla tani marke pa ta dengar ta noshik ta tani semser ta tani pe mambo yung gore techo korwati mang chi shu ting atso tani samlo yak botang mat pi gimsin jiri karde atso samlo yak botang tbsona tani soso rang sim gna la yo pim dpa drama mambo yo pati so chama atso soso rang tani par ndpa te so mepa she ya tani she thap करे tani samlo yak botang tbna atso sim gna lan chowa gna la ya te pe haliba ga tani phanto yung gore.
So in our lives, we typically experience a great deal of suffering. Suffering generated from our interactions with other persons, interpersonal relationships, love relationships, anger that is generated in our relationships, or feelings of resentment. And these lead to feelings of pressure, of unhappiness, of anxiety, etc. But actually the main reason that we experience this suffering is that we don't know how to really reason properly about our suffering. And if we were able to do so, we would be able to get rid of or eliminate a lot of this suffering, and it would bring us a great deal of benefit.
Tani sambate kangreze na nanga chishu te tani sambate gum gyawya te res gum gyawya te tani nga chu nang chu nangla na tani pe yang samlo khim char bo tani yang tani chayore te sargi ge chu gongban mare chu samlo mare na nga chu tani sharshok la na tani sacha mambo la tani samgore pe na tani gum gyawya te tani tadang tani nang chu la lojong tani mambo she ya te sota je lama da tapa teni ge teni re samban ra oda teni nga chu marcha phomo inna teni nga chu mangso inna ta nga chu teni go mare nga chu teni choban bar ya ta te nga chu teni kora jawe ta teni ma to ba lojong mambo che ya ta teni gom jawe ta to so nga chu go mare samban ra o teni nga chu nambi teni ta je sacha mambo la ta teni samsri ore te mare ji nga chu teni gom jawe inna ra teni lojong che ya te 아주 참아 고래 때 라마타 박치고 말이지 옛날 라마타 바였나 되니 코랑 칩도 되니 곰겸 큰다 로종셴케제 아주 망속 옛날 되니 다 아주 칩도 곰겸 큰 말에 가랑 솔라타롱 레카젬바 마볼리기 요리 지티 있나 아주 망속 양 되니 곰겹 고래 곰겨야데 빼 까침보래.
So the third part, or the third of the threefold formula, is the most important, and that is meditation or practice. A very strange idea has cropped up among Buddhist communities, particularly in the East. And this isn't an idea that springs from the religious tradition itself, and yet it is still very prevalent in society. And this is the idea that meditation and intense study of the Buddhist teachings is something, things or undertakings that only lamas and monks do. It is felt that lay Buddhists don't need to engage in these practices, and it's fine if they simply do things like make offerings and do kora, etc. So it is felt that lay Buddhists don't need to meditate, they don't really need to study the Buddhist teachings. And indeed, this is not the case. It's not true. Meditation and study are things that everyone needs. Whilst lamas and monks are specifically or professionally engaged in these two pursuits. Lay Buddhists, even though and are not professionals or especially engaged in these pursuits, they have many other tasks and things that they need to accomplish in their lives, and yet they also very much need to study their teachings and to meditate as well. This is very important.
Tani gum jabzeyati countries kare kang la zegresina gum jabzeyati ngacho tarta ga tangrip kitini tsigla par girna karize gorizina tini simkham go jondr simkham go jondr pena ngacho zupo la tini lipo la jondr machina tini ngacho lipo la tini nat jamra mambu yungu yori te chama ha go ri jondr chege yori yena ngacho simkham go thola jondr chege ate ha go yo mare ota ngacho simkham la jondr machina tani semkham nanglayang yang tani nat rada mandra mambo yung tenri res ngaso perna chu lipola tani jondr yak bomashi tani zama kanshong manshong za tani choten yak bomashi lipola jondr mashi ngaso nat yung yore dedang raboshi ne ngaso semkham la yang jingni semkham la jondr mashi tani semkham nangla tani kanyi ke nam tokze ne tani nam tok ra mandra mambo tani yung o tani shede na tani ngaso semkham yang detang me pa tang tani yargi me pa So,
in terms of this term meditation, if we're going to translate it into a more contemporary words, we might say that what is being described here is mind training. So just as we train our bodies, we need to exercise them, and if we don't, they will become sick. This is something that everyone knows, of course. However, what most people don't realize or don't understand, that this is also a logic that we need to apply to our minds as well. If we don't train them, if we don't exercise them, then they become ill, just like our bodies become ill when we don't exercise them. So in terms of our bodies, if they don't get physical activity, if they are not eating healthy food, if they're not kept in a good state of hygiene, then they will become sick. And so it is with our minds. If we don't exercise them, if we constantly give rise to destructive and rubbish-like thoughts, then our minds will become not only unhealthy, but we will also be not able to improve them. So it's for this reason that we need to practice meditation.
Teni gum jabna ta nga cho teni sim kham te la pe yarji halim leba chimbo teni de rojuar pe na nga cho lipun ra wena lipo la jondr china ta khorang chat chila teni mahlip ko warta teni yarji ro detang yongore jete ina nga cho lipo te jondr halepa chimbo shina teni hal lepa ga teni te chap mepa ga teni yarji ro go na rojuar mare teni I khorang kaungta kale mar gun ro re ina nga cho simte tinda mandu nga cho simte la teni jondr ya bo jap thamna teni khorang teni chu tha mepa go ni yarji hal lepa ga yarji nga cho loyer linde wa teni yarji teni simkham la teni rojuar ti gimsen ze na yana ti nelik te nga cho ya bo ha go go ndu.
So through meditation, it is possible for us to improve our minds, to develop them to a very great extent. So with our bodies, with our physical bodies, by training them, by exercising them, it's possible for us to advance them to a particular level. However, the extent to which we're able to train our bodies or improve our bodies is not one that's limitless. Inevitably, we will age. However, with our minds, it is actually possible that we can develop and refine them to an extent that is, in fact, limitless. And this is something that a principle or an idea that we must understand.
Teni nur nyang mare teni nga so lamkha ya boz landona teni lamkha tin la komba chingdona nindona teni nga so teni te rogo I satila teni thachini chini rore teni nga so karti lamkha ti teni roni shi jana nga so gandhi kabli jamna teni tontak me parin ro te indi tambu nga so chula lo jong she na o nga so lamkha te o ta nga rang thuba she go re teni samba she go re teni gom jab go re samba te yak boz nga so teni nangba ga chula lo jong shin sama ha go go re.
So, in terms of how we need to go about our Buddhist practice, this is something that we can't afford to be mistaken in respect of. We can't afford to be mistaken in terms of our understanding of how we should go about our practice. So each step of the way needs to unfold one at a time, one after the next. And so the importance of listening, of contemplating and meditating or practice, the threefold formula of Buddhist practice is something that every Buddhist needs to understand.
Ata tindi indi techo yang bozu teni koat yorgo gore te ngacho shirtang ka teni nangchu la lojong shi sir ka teni ta dongjin rao tindi zire te la koa yang bozu chakko gore.
So this is something, this framework of Buddhist study or of Buddhist practice is something we need to understand well.
Teni ti oda ngacho terang ka teni kapshang da dang teni rewa yongkeng ka teni yang teni chu teni shakare te ngacho terang ka teni chun da ngacho teni chuchu nima ni yore terang re teni yang nani yang yore teni ngashi ni ka teni rewa yore teni ka ngama tang shimani kan rewa yore tinang la shapa ga teni nangdon ticho ngashi teni rewa yongkeng ka teni nangdon zhe.
So I'd like to now move on to content that is related to the topic of this evening's teaching. So we have one teaching this evening, and we also have another teaching the evening after tomorrow. And both of these teachings are interconnected. What we talk about tonight will be related to what we talk about on Friday evening.
Teni ti nala nima nipo ti nala nga so kare cha kare zena teni paror to shimba tik nyamlin kandi she go char o te sha kare teni nga so nangchu nala yena teni namba sang je thaba chimbo nyamlin sama char dona teni paror to shimba tik zia di nala dagare paror shimba tik mayimbi jamba yo mare teni te nyamlin she char no di ba nga so nima ni nala samala ngo chu she kare.
And the content of these two nights' teachings, the subject will primarily be the 6 perfections and how we go about practicing them. Indeed, the 6 perfections contain in the 6 perfections the complete path of the Buddhist teachings. There is nothing, in fact, that lies beyond these. So this will be the subject of our teachings tonight and on Friday evening.
Tani paror to shimba zia te paror to shimba ze gui gimsen te kang re zina nga so paror zina tani tarwa topsa tela ze yore paror to shimba zina tani nga so sachandini tani tarwa topsa ga sachalan roa pena nga so zhozang ga nala deni tani chi tsarkani tani parkala tani roya on rao tela tani paror to shimba ze tani ze gre.
So in terms of the 6 paramita or the 6 perfections, the reason that they have this name is that they are in fact that which conveys us to the state of liberation.
Tani tindi tini paruto shimba tela dona tigri tini tigpo ti tangbo ti kangre zina jimba ze yore jimba nga so tini soso rang la yupi tini ngupo kangdang kang na tini te mo jan la tini mo tini chi orwo yang na napa tini dungur yongken tesola tini par jinni tini mo teso tini dungur par meba shia tini tola tini sanlo tango re te tangbo jimba ze.
So of these 6 perfections, the first is generosity. And with the perfection of generosity, what is being referred to is sharing with others, whether it be the poor or those who are suffering or those who are ill, the things that we have, and by doing so, eliminating their suffering.
Teni jimba kapsa nga tso teni tondang ni la samlo tang go res tondang ni te gang res na chikti sosorang ka teni simkham la teni jongder shia ga tondang res chigri ni te gang res na nga tso te dang nyamde teni me jandang simchen jamba la teni phantoya oti tondang re teni ni go la samlo tang go res.
So when we are benefiting others, when we're giving things to, or when we're giving to others, or when we are practicing the parameter of generosity in respect of others, it's important that we keep two things in mind. And the first of these is to use this opportunity as one of mind training, as an opportunity to train our minds. And the second thing to keep in mind is that is through our giving to benefit others and other beings.
Teni semkam go jongderti kanti shegen de zena nga so boba ga teni ama ga teni lama so ina ngami lama yakbo be halipa ga nyamlin shinken ga mati so ko chu semkam kanti jongder shegen de zena tangbo kapsa teni khoso go semgan na layang teni nyomomba ta teni samlo dugbo ta samsar dugbo ta teni mombo yung go yore teni samba yakbo ta samba zangbo ti nyonyo ma to yung go yamare teni ti kapsa khorang so sosorang ka semti nitsirti kandizri te hakoya ga shirta perna nyima chika nala teni ngarang ka sem ga nala te samba dugbo samba dugjak teni kena te korang chogo do nakbo zu jakni do nakbo chu jak yore teni ngarang ka sem ga nala teni chu shamba da nyar jin rawo teni ga samlo yakbo zu kena teni do karwo chu jak yore teni shini tayong ti teni gongmu teni tayong na teni machipo nangla teni namtokra manda mambo yong dea tetso nangla teni mangchi shuti parchewa ti teni pena jacha gupchin rawo jachin rawo teni te changma do nakbore te nangla do karbo nyonyo masto yong yo mare te khorang so teni tangbo sem la tati teni reze teni go ni takyo reze ngacho pena tarta ina teni chanak go ni teni ngaso tashit shipi ne kumna teni tanjang go yore tanjang zmena teni ngaso kajaka labthap go yamare ten rapo shini nyamlin shinken chawata ngarang ka nesrte ngarang ka namtokte teni namtokte kandi dugbu kandi yakbu kandi ngarang ka simte kandi zren zene teni khorang chaw teni ngaso simte layang teni tanjang teni yopa shini teni tayongdi tangbu ne kumna teni do nakpo haleba mambo karbo chingni ni smato me ba teni yimba khorang chom thong yore.
So what is it that we mean by mind training in this context? How was it that the greatest practitioners in the past went about their mind training? Well, first of all, when they started off with their practice, their minds were full of afflictive thoughts, of negative emotions. Positive, constructive thoughts were, by comparison, very few. So to begin with, to get an idea of the conditions of their own, or the condition of their own minds, they, over the course of one day, would observe the nature of their thoughts. And every time they gave rise to a negative thought or a destructive thought, they would lay one black stone on the ground. And whenever they gave rise to a positive thought, such as a thought of a compassionate thought or a thought of loving kindness, then they would place a white stone on the surface. And then by the time evening would come, over the course of one day, they no doubt had given rise to thoughts of many kinds. At the beginning, they would discover that around 80% of their thoughts had been negative in nature. That is, 80% of the stones were black ones. There were only a very small number of white stones amongst them. So to begin with science, if we're going to start out on a course of conduct, we need to first have data. And having data, then we understand how we are to proceed. So it's the same with our practice. We need to gain an idea of the condition of our minds to start with. And in respect of this, practitioners in the past would gather their data by observing their minds. And when they did so, they found that at the very beginning, the black stones were in the majority.
teni ti kapsa ngarang so sem ga nala teni dugbo samlo dugbo teni indi teni nga so kha gaja shenda deyang teni ga yang dugbo teni mangche shu de teni je tenta was nga so libo leka lena teni to dugbo res karti nga so kha ga teni yakbon raw shadna yang ti zimba res nga so sem ga nala dugbo sam teni kha ga yakbon raw shadna teni zimba ren ro re teni nga so yang sem ga nala teni dugbo sam ni teni libo go yakbon raw lena teni juma teni juma ren ro re te so sama yakbo yong thab ko mare nga so lida ngak teso go thone teni yakbo yong na mayo na so sem la thyo re teni indi nyima chipo go nala nga so sem teni nakbo re sabi jini teni gaja nakbo ren ro re lisha shopa yang nakbo ren ro re teni re sarna koso go mjew maung bala khorang la mjew jimje teni yo re ti jimje te yang teni nga so nakbo ma to yo mare.
So if our minds are negative, if our then the words that we speak will also be negative, and the actions that we undertake will also be negative. If our minds are negative and yet the words we speak are good, then this is ultimately a situation of fakeness or falseness. And so it is too when our minds are negative but our actions on the surface are good. This is also fakeness and falseness. So really the quality of our actions and the quality of our words really rests on or depends on the state of our minds. And if our minds are bad, if they are black in nature, then all of our conduct, our words as well, will also be black and negative in nature. This is the inevitable result.
Tendi ngaso de kapsa teni leka lena kangye na teni jimre thamje po teni dugborin ro te indi indam na jirju jab go re ti jimsenji teni nyamlin shinken so kale teni jirju jab ni teni sheondi teni karbo te chemang ro teni nakpo te chenyong ro ni teni thama teni tezi yin rambo rapo teni gum jab ni nyamlin shene sosorang ka semla jirju jab sosorang ka semla jondrftat teni sheondi teni jima teni mangchishu te teni karbore teni nakpo te nyonyo ma to meba teni chakbares teni tela teni ngacho mi sem zeate ngacho jondr matena teni degbo teni nakbo mambo teni je yena ngacho karte gum jab jondr tena teni ko jini jelak jevzang ro ayongken teni zi yambate teni gone teni kocho teni tanla phabyores.
So in this way, the result of our actions will inevitably be negative if our mind is in an originally negative state. And this is something that we need to change. This is something that we need to work on through practice. And by doing so, it was found that increasingly or gradually it was possible over the course of one day for the number of black stones to gradually become fewer and the number of white stones to be gradually increased. And by continuing with one's practice, by continuing to train one's mind, it was ultimately possible for practitioners to reach a point where most of the stones they laid out by the end of the day were white, and black stones only comprised a small number of the overall total. So it's on this basis that we understand, or that it was understood, that without training, with no training at all, our minds essentially exist in a negative condition, but with training, by training them, it is possible for us to continually improve them.
Jimba te la teni lo teni jondr she go re ti jimba se ya te tambo kapsa teni nga cho yin so rang la yo pingu po kang yin na teni par jin tra ga mare se nga cho jin tra ga mare jin mi ja la jin go na teni jin ga mare pe na nga cho nima cha bo yo ne kam na chin den ji kang thong ji yo na a te nga rang ga thong go sa nga rang kha kum ga nga rang ga thong go de mi ja la jin ji yo mare mi ja la jin na te nga la yo mare sam ne nga cho sem ga na la teni tambo shi ne teni zung yo re teni kale kale gimsen teni sam teni shiti teni nga so semte parte chal hobore ne teni kale kale onyima chigla oda nga so mi mambo zla teni chin thongya me teni ngarang rangla teni sherdam kangdi yona teni nyima mi chama khakum ni teni rewi kaps teni ngarang ka samlo tana 다 나만 잡고 있나 되니 디값을 되니 나랑 그 미잠바 저 만통 안 잡고 시니 나랑 그 통거리 디값이 나왔다 나랑란 통하면나 다 메나 되니 메 나랑 그 되니 메나 작은도 되니 친데 되니 미잠바 저라 작은 삼반다고 되니 심금 그 통에 용들때 갈래 갈래 통용 거래 쪼대가 저 rem바 동지야 돼 가서 우보 키는 잠벌은 그 미오로 탐주 보식 보시야지 뜸 찍게 하시다고 말이 야르크 찍게 하시다고 말이 미시게 하시다고 말이 된다 보직 배나가 좀 잠벌랑라더니 된 나빠 찍게 매바다 잠벌랑나 미창 보시게 매바더니 시다고 말이지 각보래지 옛날에 가서더니 수소랑 그 심라 종들시니 어다 니마실라 나랑라 요핑고 복강 되니 미잔라 jingo나 띵아랑 jingo인 삼반다고 So
when we first start off with our practice of generosity, we are not willing to give the things that we have in our possession to others. We are not willing to do so. We don't want to do so. For example, when we start out on our practice on a hot day, when we're thirsty, and we are the only person with water, we feel very reluctant to share this water, to give it to others, fearing that if we do so, we won't have any to drink ourselves. So we feel very tightly attached to our possessions. However, through practice, it's possible for us to gradually relax this grip, and such that through our training on a hot day when everyone's thirsty, whilst to begin with, as mentioned before, we were very unwilling to share our water with others. However, through our training and practice, we are ultimately able to reach a state where we find ourselves extremely willing to share what we have with others, even if it means not having any to drink ourselves. So it's not possible in terms of this training that we're speaking of, it's not possible for us as individuals or any individual or indeed any country to make all the poor rich or to make all the people who are ill healthy. However, it is possible through this kind of mental training to shape ourselves, to shape our minds to such a state where we are willing to give and share whatever we have with anyone and everyone, even when it means that we might not have these things ourselves. This does no longer become a great problem for us.
Tani shetang jimba de la nga so jimba sim yana jimba ji de nga so tani thaba chimbo na la song yore chikti nga so ngubu jimbare zaya yinna gyonya yinna gang yinna tani mu jamba mu tani jogorwo tani yinna te sola parajin ya te te chigri tani ni de gang re zena nga so tani simjin perna njikchak yongken dungri yongken tani yona kosola njikchak menke mebasia perna simjin ka tani sukyo yanrao simjin tani perna tani ga dungri nyong denken ka tani njikchak sem ka nala njikchak mambo yongken te sola njikchak meba zoya te nga so jimba zegre tani jimba nire tani ti tola chu jimba zene tani mijan la tani nyangje dang tani mijan la cherap tani ka jimba re ti jimba ze ate pena ngarang ka nyangje te parmal jan la jin jaga nda o tani ya marata mijan la tani gimsun shanni pena nga so nyangje kan di gum gore cherap kan di gum gore zini gumsir te par lamna tani jimba nda bore tani te jimba sim zegre zite so.
So we usually, in the Mahayana tradition, speak of 3 or 4 different types of generosity. The first being generosity in terms of material things. So this can include food, clothes, etc., giving these things to the poor and others. The second kind of generosity that we speak of is generosity in terms of giving the state of freedom from fear to other beings. So this can include releasing animals, freeing them from a state of fear, etc. The third form of generosity that we speak of is generosity in terms of the Dharma. So by this we mean generosity in giving compassion and wisdom to others. But this doesn't mean we give someone else our own compassion. What it means is that we explain to them the doctrines of the Buddhist teachings. We explain to them how to go about practicing meditation. This is generosity in giving the Dharma.
Teni shirtang nga tsu mi mambo go teni ngupo soso la jingi yore nga tsu la jingi mambo yore soso la margoa teni mambo yore pe na mrere la gomba pe mambo yo pa teni yang teni chala pe mambo yo pa teni pesho tsawa ni tang margong khen soso rang la teni tsawa ni teni gupa men khen yena mi jan la teni gupa yong khen teni chala mambo yore te yena teni nga tsu te jemba tango yo mare te mi mambo tango mare se te matong i gemchen te kang re na teni soso rang teni te orboda teni soso rang teni choboda teni nyamnyung teni yo mamnyung i gemchen ji rezo karti ngone tane nga tsu nyima chigla nga tsu teni te chalak kaya meba shi ne pe na teni lamkha landro ne teni lamkha la teni de dengkha teni mi mambo ndwa teni gun chwa nda bozu teni nga tsu yana teni zangkur chingda bo teni zla nga tsu teni gun chwa z kerna teni gu soso go mche ga nyamnyung z teni soso go tola shona teni ti jini teni nga tsu ta zo mala teni jemba tong go ya te karchim bo zimba te ha go re.
In general, people give us a lot of things. A lot of things are gifted. Most of the time, it's things that we don't particularly need. Clothes, other items, things that we have absolutely no use for whatsoever. Indeed, the things that we do need, in fact, are not usually the ones that are given. A lot of the time, a lack of appreciation of the importance of generosity is due to the fact that we ourselves have not had an experience of impoverishment, that this is not something that we have personally experienced. So if, say, we were to live on the side of the road homeless for 1 week, then after we had gained this experience, we would surely find ourselves in a situation of realizing the importance of generosity and giving to others.
Teni pe na mukhashi teni shiwi ne kamna teni kharangati gurgum ganala te komba ha lepa mangbo nduzi komba ha lepa mangbo teni komba te so pe na teni torma yenare teni tola konya yenare shela kola yenare te so ha lepa mangbo tsawa ne teni ngaso tsawa ne teni kunyo mare te thana ti thola yo pi takma yang mara lem manduzi teni mambo nyone teni ta gu yo mara ta mambo nyo ne teni gugong thana ku gam ganala yang teni mashungwa da teni mambo yore teni shinro ne kamna temi mambo tante kadi je go re joda nyam da teni sakja go re ta sajib la leb go re ta kadi she go re zini teni zenken teni mambo ndo tenda bore te ngone tane soso rang mashi kaps teni karte teni lhammo teni yona mijan la soso rang la ba na ne kherne teni gongkhing muzla ta jana teni gewa chim bore ndo re teni soso karte rang master na shitsarwi jini teni muzjan baz ka ta na teni te soso rang ta yo mare te gewa zu yo re ta yana teni gewa chim bo yo mare teni yindi ngacho namjin komsur ya bozu teni chakchi gong nga chun chua na la o tan ding ala nguni ktani goyaz ure samlo tang tani karti goyaz yenna nga so nekps tani jala je mathna chakre karti margu atindi yona te jala chak gong dugze tani nga so shertang nga so so rang la margu ati jala chana ya bo marita yenna nga so ti thoni jondr shine tangbo nga rang la margu ati jala chat tani kale nga rang la goya te yang tani so semgum ko thoni jondr shi tam tana tani yargi yak bon rogre.
When many people die, they still have wardrobes in their homes that are stuffed full of clothes, clothes of all different kinds, much more than they ever would have been able to wear, and many of them with labels still attached to them. Clothes, so many in fact that often they can't even be fit inside one wardrobe. And after a person dies, then there is the question of what to do with all these things. It is often not known how to go about disposing of them. So what we really need to do is get into the habit of asking ourselves whether in fact we really do need the things that we have, and if we don't, then we should train ourselves in giving them towards others. And the best, if possible, that we are able to give these things that we don't need to others before we die. There's great merit, there is great virtue in doing so. If our possessions are distributed among others after we pass on, there is still benefit and merit here. However, there is great merit if we do it ourselves before we die. So in terms of this training, we can first start off with items that we identify we don't really need, and give these to others, and then gradually increase our capacity to be generous until the point that we are readily willing to give things, even things that we do need for ourselves, away to others, and in so doing cultivate great generosity.
Tani nipa de nga cho munjik pa kyap jivjin base tani namgin pe na nga cho lamkhala yenare tani namgin kasakawa yenna nga cho rowi ne kamna pe na simchin tani ju pe na mi jamba ga tani simchin tani sayandra yangna pe na nga cho langkhur tani ro yo pi kaps tani langkhur lamkhala tani sokchak tani yona ota Korang tini langkor tin nang la dena korang langkor jimazi yone tini korang sajak sare sambandra ota yang na pe na chig nang la tini yang ngaso kamsa la yopi sokshak ngasi ti chig nang la lhone tini shila yobandra ota yang na tini pe na ngaso chig nang la yopi sokshak tini kamla tini yone tini korang kambore ni shila tini yona tini kamla yopati su chi nang la jakba chig nang la yopati kamla jakbandra ota tini rokpa shiya o tini 심진 강을따리나 되니 제쪽인 차나 되니 가서 때라 할레바고 돈낭 침부시고 오래 마통 가서 때든 보즈레 때샤즈레 딘디지니 가서 제쪽 온당라 되니 가시도 배런탕 요반다 오다 가시 런탕 매반다 오 딘디시잖아 되니 가서 마음발라 갈레티 빠착데 곰나 되니 가서 미낭라요 딘디 에야시네 딘뭐 가시도 되니 런탕 매바레 되니 머르 가시도 되니 제쪽 런탕 매바레 머르 가시도 되니 제쪽라 런탕 요바레 삼니 되니 딘디가 남톡페 득보데 가서 미낭라요 캐리용 그래.
So in terms of the second kind of generosity, being generous with the state of no fear, we might practice this in terms of, say, animals that we encounter when we're traveling along the road. For example, if we encounter an animal and we observe that if the animal stays there, they'll get hit when the next car comes along. If we move them into safety, then this is a kind of generosity that we can exercise. Similarly, if we come across creatures that belong in the water but they're stranded on dry land, we can move them into the water. Or alternatively, animals or creatures that belong on land but find themselves in water, then we can also remove them to a place where there's safety. And by doing this, we can help other beings. It's important that we understand that any being represents a life, and for this reason is extremely important. We can't afford to think, it's only an insect or it's only a bird, because if we do so, attributing value to this life form and not to that life form, then this very negative habit we will ultimately bring to humans and our valuation of human lives. We will start to regard this type of human or this kind of human as valuable, and these kinds of humans, their lives, as not valuable, and ultimately bring this very negative kind of judgment and evaluation into our human affairs.
Tani somebody nga zu chu ji jin ba ze gre tani chu ze ya de ga re zena tani ni je ze nga zu nang ba ge wang de shi ni shan na chu ze ya de ni la ze ge yo re de indi ga la ze ge yo re zena chi de sham dang nyar ji de la ze ge yo re de chu na ne pe kar chi shu chi gre sham dang nyar ji tani ni ba de ga re zena sher bre 쉐르브레 되니 탑당 쉐르브제 그래 가서 델레 학바가 추 가서 남발아요 말이 시티 샴냐지리 시티 되니 쉐르브레 되니 쉐르브제 와디 간디슬라제 거르지나 가서 되니 멋세 되니 소소랑 되니 체쪽 되니 상와디 저 약보 되니 신켄 되니 양나 되니 미 체쪽 되니 덴돈 오마 되니 신켄 직팅 되니 덴돈 다 추닛 약보 되니 신켄 되니 로데라 tani sherb zega yore di tini nyarji de pini mejala tani par ota mejan nyarji menken ga mozula tani nyarji gomya ga thapshi labne tani khorang nyarji mepane nyarji yoba chaba tani sherb menken ga mosjula tani nga cho sherb ti kandri gone tani yar tani ketang shi gore te labne tani khorang kale sherb mepane yoba chaba tani ga thapshi te tani par labya tela And
the third type of generosity that we speak of is generosity with the Dharma. And this is, in Buddhism, regarded as falling into two types. Firstly, generosity in terms of loving kindness and compassion. This is really the most important. And secondly, sherab, or wisdom. We speak of wisdom and means. And insofar as this, we are referring to the understanding of the ultimate truth of life. And with loving kindness and compassion, as well as with wisdom, when we give to someone, when we instruct them in a way, say, of cultivating compassion to a person who doesn't possess compassion, and thereby enable them to transform themselves from a person who did not have compassion to begin with to someone who, through cultivating compassion, is now able to possess it, we are giving them the gift of the Dharma. And so too with wisdom. By teaching others the methods of cultivating wisdom, then we are enabling them to transform themselves from a state where they initially did not possess wisdom to one where they do. And this, of all the forms of generosity, is the most important, the generosity with the Dharma.
Tani chuji jimbaze ade ngazo yang lama data yang lama chimbo da chushka da tani go mare ngazo mangso yina pe na ngarang so tani nyarje yak bogum te soso rang la nyamnyo yak boshona te jan la par lamna chokore jigre nire tani ngazo soso rang te lojong yak boshi gum gyab ne te soso rang la tani sherap tani yongore soso rang la tani tawa dang tani tasar ta te so yak bo tani yona rentang ka tawa te so yak bo yona tini te nga tsu suso go bo yenare suso go tini to nangmi yenare tso la par tini to lap tini shena te la chi ji jin ba zi chokore te indi nga tsu gong la she bi tini jin ba changma te nga tsu shertang go mos chi nga tsu chui nang la tini laglin la tamna te laglin la te dip chok tini je ma to ba tini thumbo da chimbo da odi nga tsu la par tak rang bo yon ken tini zi ma re zi nga tsu sowa ga na la ka ni nyam lin chi na she thong she choya
So in terms of giving the Dharma to others, we don't have to be a great Lama or a Tulku in order to be able to do this. We can be simply an ordinary practitioner of Buddhism, say someone who cultivates strong compassion through their practice, and by teaching others the method for cultivating compassion. And this is one thing that we can do. Similarly, by studying the Buddhist teachings and increasing our wisdom, establishing correct views and proper values, then we are certainly in a position to share these with our friends, share them with our family members, and in so doing, this is definitely considered generosity with the Dharma. So whatever level of knowledge and whatever level of Dharma practice that we are at, we can certainly share this with others, and this definitely constitutes generosity in the Dharma.
Tani nga tsu kimla parandro tsarwi jini, kimnang la nga tsu yarta marta shini ta, nga me jan la jin choyanda tindi chi undu mundu. Tani tago gore, chigiri, niri nga tsu gam tsu ka shini, o tandi na la nga rang la me jan la par jimba tangna tindi choya undu mundu tago gore. Tani nga tsu chokzi ga langten te su saran tenni, dinang la nga tsu me jan la tindi jin choyanda tindi undu mundu tani, tani yoba te su me jan la tangna, tani nga tsu jimba zigiri.
So upon going home, seeing whether or not we can benefit others with what we've learned tonight, or by going home and opening our wardrobe and seeing whether or not there's anything that we can give to others, turning the contents of our desks out and seeing whether or not there's anything that we can share with others. These are all forms of generosity we can practice.
Tani nga tsu shilola tini pe na kangtang lan zhowi kawi lam kala yenandra, yang tini langkur tang ni zhowi kawi yenandra, tini nga tsu yarta marta shini, ondi la nga nge rokba che goya ga tini me yenari, tundro yenari, tini indu mindu. O tini dungur tini yongkhen ga me, nge korang ga dungur de par meba she na tini shi tumsa, shi tabya, tini ga sokshak tini indu mindu tini tani, tini yo na nga tsu lamsang, tini tela rokba she ya ga tini ga, tini kumsur,
So when we're walking on the road or if we're in our cars, we should be on the lookout to see whether there are any persons or whether there are any animals that we can help. We should be on the lookout to see whether there are any beings whose suffering we are in a position to relieve or eliminate. And by practicing in this way, it is possible for us to establish really good habits in terms of our generosity practice.
Tini tetsu sumga thola tini tarung jimbashi yore te pe karchishu tere sambo ti nangne kyang karchishu tere te kangre zena nga so shamdang nyarji ga jimbaze gre shamdang nyarji ga jimbaze ji te kangri zela zegre zena tani ngarang semga tangni mi sosola gaya mi sosola tini shamba tini mi sosola tsiwa o te nga so ngarang rang semga tangni tini yona tini tela shamba de mususo la jinze rezi te ma to ngarang ge sem gnani shamba de len ni mojan la jin te mare ngarang ge sem gnani mususo la tini o nga misuso la ga misuso la sham misuso la tsi o tini yona tini tela shamba ge jimba zegre.
And there's actually a fourth kind of generosity, and this form of generosity is, in fact, the most important. This is generosity in giving loving kindness and compassion to others. So this kind of generous giving entails us sharing our own joy, our love, our own compassion, sharing and giving this to others.
Teni sem gna la shamba te yoni teni ti jini teni nga so musola ka goni kaja yabo parashaya mi sim gaya kaja teni shaya teni leka ga tone na ya nga so mi sosola gerk leka da gerk teni chowa da teni mambu yo rete ina te tang nyamde teni nga so soso jini chasuki goni teni mi janla teni ta pamba yo ya ga teni leka legore shawa tindi dubgore nga tindi shena nga chu mit lizi mulize ande ngone hale pa tini rentang yakbo yongkenda shawa yakbo dubthumken tindi zrezi nga chu tindi zre te imbi jimsen king nga chu mulite thopka tindi zege yore te yana tindi goni shamba de par tini jinna tini te jimba yakshu te teres.
So with kindness in our minds, then we, through our words, can speak things that are pleasing to others. And in our action, or the work that we undertake, of course, there is a lot of things, a lot of work that we need to do for our own interests. However, as far as possible, we should strive to undertake action that is beneficial for others. And by doing this, our human lives, this human form that we have, is in fact very valuable. Its preciousness and its rareness, the reason for this lies in this. So generosity in giving compassion and loving kindness is very important.
Teni nga so muzina teni muzyanla teni nga so ngoni chaki meba goni shamba dang tsewa shamtse te soso rang te semla yona ti muti tini muk tini mojan latana ti muk tini tartante te jeni khakharez.
And for humans to look at another being with unconditional loving kindness and compassion in one's eyes, then to look at a human being in this way, and then for a human being with no compassion to look at another human being, there is a great and vast difference between the two.
Yang pena mchik tini pena chokche gangla zama jimbo tini ziyona tini koranga halepa sim gatane ti zasamni mukatana ti mukatatande yang jamba chigre te tangaso sim gatane mo jambala shamba ta tsewa goni taya tini mukatatande khakharez. Chokche tola zama yona tini muti korang zama la gani korang stani halepa zasamni tini kapse tini muk ti tasrte yang mi muti zama la muk tasrte tasr jamba zre ti muk tasrte ta ngaso mi jala shamche goni talik tini khakharendus.
So, for example, the look in a person's eyes when they are looking at delicious food laid out on the table, really desiring very much to eat the food in front of them. The look in their eyes at this time and the look in a person's eyes when they are giving rise to very strong kindness and compassion is completely and entirely different.
Teni shamdang tsewa ti sim ganala teni shamdang tsewa yakbo yona ti ngaso musjir musla tanayang ngarang rang sim ganala teni shamtse yopi kapse teni musla tana mati cho chama teni ngarang rang halepa mnyang jibo teni muyit gwa teni thongore.
So when we look at anyone, when we have compassion and loving kindness in our minds, then when anyone who looks at us will find us to be extremely pleasant and extremely pleasing.
Teni mus yamba teso tamchepo teni yit gwa ta nyang jibo teni thongi kapse teni ti gimsen tela teni soso rang sim ganala yang halepa chora dewa chora kipo teni mundas sama ngarang chokbore sambandra oda mundaso tamjepo teni halepa yitungware mayakbore m nyangjibore sambandra oda yopi kapse teni suso rang sem ganala ya dewi chora halepa dewa tang teni kipi chora kipi nangwa teni yongyoare.
And when those around us are regarding us as with fondness and regarding us in this positive way, then this generates an extremely strong sense of happiness in our own minds. We view everyone around us as our friends. They all appear to be nice, to appear to be lovely. So by looking upon others with kindness and compassion, the response that this then engenders in others in respect of ourselves generates a very strong sense of happiness.
Tini ti soso rang tini simkham go detang lape halepa pantok chimbo yongyoare.
And this has great benefit for the state of health of our own minds.
Teni te soso rang la pantoya chibo matsepe mi janla yang teni pan haliba yakbo tokore pe jana teni ngacho lamkha la teni muschik semkana la dungur yone teni yana kocho kimnang la teni pama la teni natun shonganda o yana koso teni kimsang nang la teni tondak shongwa yana korang rang la tondak shonganda o teni tondak 강롱 쇼네 셈페 득니 딘디 람칼라 코랑 셈 큐니 데데요 피캅스 tani mi jamba chekate langone khorang sim gnani mitela gabu goni shambi goni mitela chita yana mitela gadni tani ngo yigbatang yana lakba da shiwa tini shena ti miti simkam gnangla tani chora dewa z yongne ti semnang gdungmer teso kapchla ti mepa tini changbo yore.
So it's not just in terms of ourself that we can obtain great benefit, but it's also possible to bring others great benefit in this way. So we can imagine someone sitting on the side of the road, maybe they've had some kind of issue with their parents or with their family members, or maybe it's a problem within themselves, sitting there miserably on the side of the road. by simply coming along and looking at this person with a mind of great kindness and compassion, or by smiling at them or by holding their hand, it is possible in a single instant for the suffering in the other person's mind to be wiped away.
Teni kyocho suso samlo tanda ngaso simkyoni simdigni simsir ngala niyopi kapse teni ngaso pama maimba ngaso tokbo maimba mi jamba teni ngoma shiba teni zika ngaso la teni korang sim ka tani teni gaboshi ni teni teni lagba yubanda yana gamu gaya teni zushi ni teni ngaso sim ka nala tsura dewa teni shonga teni shongnyo undu suso gondang jamna.
So, in fact, we should all think the state of being miserable, being sad, one where our parents are not with us, we have no friends, we have no familiar acquaintances. If someone were to come along in this situation and to sincerely smile at us with great kindness and to take our hand, would there ever be would we have ever experienced a kind of happiness greater than this? This is something that we should all think about. Has anyone tonight ever experienced this kind of happiness? Happiness coming from others being kind to you in an time of great misery and sadness. Many people.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is true. This is the case. Everybody is the same.
Ti ngarang la no pa chegre di ngarang la tini sem kana la chu sam gun duk sam ba ndaw tendi mayong ba chini on de me mend su sang ma tini da ngarang ga jog boyin sam ba daw mend su sang ma tini ngarang la tini phan ba shin ken ga moyin sam ba daw tendi ga sam lo chang tham na te pe mi jan la phan to yo re jang la phan to yo re.
So when we are out and about, going about our affairs, we shouldn't be in the habit of regarding those we come across as bad or potentially harmful or threatening. Rather, we should habituate ourselves to regarding others as our friends, as beneficial and potentially kind to us. And by thinking in this way, by training ourselves in this way, not only will it bring benefit to others, but also to ourselves.
Sendi tolat korang ngarang ngomsiwa matin dizirendu inayang tini korang cewa ngamada ngawati sola te korang ngarang ka apare ngarang ka amare ngarang ka ajere o tindi tini ta samlo tang tini ti kaps cewa ngamati kaps tini korang ngalape kwadran chembo tini mo tindi re samni tindi mi chamala tini te ju kwadran ko tini sem yongken zhenzhanbi sem yongken tindi zishina. So
it's this is how it is said in the Buddhist teachings that whoever we meet when we are out and about, often we, in this lifetime, they are strangers, they're not familiar acquaintances. However, in previous lifetimes, they were surely our own fathers or mothers or sisters. And so in previous lifetimes, they will have, in fact, shown us great kindness. And so we train ourselves in recollecting and remembering the kindness that they will have shown to us in past lifetimes. And this is a very beneficial way to think.
Mi mangbozo keteni pena ngarang rang lakpa mi jan la zeni lakpa jan la zeni teni ngarang lakpa tinna la mi jamba ngarang la tsir tini ngarang la chaya mi jamba ngala chik tini thobya teni ko thola teni mi mangbo teni jawa jab ko yore rete inna teni ngaso kale sim kham la teni girchu jamne teni ta phanchuni ngi mi jamba ga lakbana la ngarang ka kari jak gore sam ngarang la jakje indu mindu ngi mi jamba chula kari jing go sare ngala mi jamba la jinya tindi chu indu mindu tela samlo tang gores.
So under ordinary circumstances where we have not begun to train our minds the way that we usually think is with our outstretched hand, who or when am I going to be given something? This is the way that we usually think. However, through our training, we can transform ourselves to a point that we think instead about what it is that we can put in another's hand, how we can go about giving to them, whether or not there's anything that we can give to them.
Teni tendiga nga so samlo taya ga teni komsor ya bozo teni chaksona teni nga so so rang semte yang demo ke bo teni yong tab kare nga so samlo tana nga rang su semte chi ta gormo mangbo ta khangba chimbo ta teni chi teni chuwa hale pa tuji gebo tra gebo tendis ka thone nga so sem ko dewa te yong ko yo sam ko yore ta te mare je nga te so rang sem ko teni tin roluk te ma shi bare nga so sem ko teni dewa je ati chong ko thone yong ko yore.
So by cultivating this kind of thought habit, it's really possible for us to experience great joy and happiness in our minds. Many of us think that by having a lot of money or a big house or an extremely luxurious lifestyle, that happiness will spring from this. But in actual case, this is really not the case. We think like this because we don't understand how our minds work. In actual fact, happiness comes from very small things.
Tani nga tu sem ke dungur te yang tereze, nga rang tu sem ke dungur te yang chimbo ko toni yang yongre ta, tani yang mang chi shu te nga tu dungur te chong ko toni gimtsin me pa, tani ke tani chong ko toni, so rang nga tu rang ke samlo tani ke toni, yonggo yore dong ke tola gimtsin che po jiji menken, tani so rang ke samlo tang sir mandrik pa ta, tani so rang ke tani samlo tang sir norwa, tindi ke toni nga so dungur haliba mambo di toni yonggo yore.
And it's exactly the same with our suffering. Of course, suffering comes from major causes or big sources, but the majority, in fact, comes from small things, things that are rather meaningless in nature. And it is due to the fact that our reasoning processes, that the way that we go about reasoning things and reasoning things is the main cause of our own suffering.
Tenti yindi nga so sem ko tola jirju te jawya te pe kar chimbore sem ko tola jirju jamna te nga so me jan la yang pan to gore so rang sem la demo ke boyong gore mis sem la jirju tang go ndu teni sem la jirju tang ya te thapshi kan la tang go gore zina te nga so gom japi go ne te jirju tang go gore.
So it's important for this that we make change at the level of our own minds. This is extremely important. By doing so, we will benefit ourselves, we will also benefit others, and we will thereby experience happiness. How it is that we actually go about working on our minds, how is it that we go about working on our minds? It is precisely through meditation that we do so.
Tani namgin nga so semte tani gandhiz gala tani korang tani gandhiz ngerin rowa te chite nga so chokbola tani thukyo ni de nga so khori tang tani lobso da ndoso la tani thukyo tani yendi namgin nga so mi jalla tani rokshi ki tang tani mi jalla jamba tang ya ta tani ge korla te samlo tang ya tani ge pecha tani loya tani ge korla khabdashi ya tindi ti yona tini kale nga so semte ti shola den rore.
So under ordinary circumstances, our minds and the transformation of our minds really relies on our external environment, our friends, our education, etc. So in terms of helping others and showing generosity to others, if we make it a practice to read books about this, to discuss it with others, and to share these ideas, then this will be very effective.
Tindi tini nga tsu nima terang ni zong ta nga tsu samlo kanti tang go ri zina ta nga rang ga khimnang la tini me jan la tini jinna jin choya me jan la phan thoya tini par jin ba tang ya andu mendu ta ya ta tini mo nga rang la tini me jan ba ga tini ono pa par me ba shi ya ta me jan ba ga jikchak me ba shi ya tini me chik bo mare simjin se na chik bori simjin jan ga jan ba cho jikchak me ba tini shi ya tini ga tab sing nga rang la endu.
So what we have to do then from today onwards is to ask, to inquire of ourselves whether there is anything in our homes that we can give to others, whether there is anything that we can give to others that will benefit them, and secondly, whether there is any way that we have to eliminate the fear of other humans or other animals, whether or not there is any capacity or potential for us to do this.
Tini titol la samlo mambo tangko re titol la rabna nga so nyima chigla titol la tini tindi undu mundu tindi samlo kashi tangko re manta ya nga so tini nyima re ga na la kashi yo go re te yo ta me nga so to takbar tini namo mar nyewe ne kamna tini dang jam ne ota terang nyima chigbo de la nge tini mal me jan la tini phan thoya ga tini samlo tindi ki asong o lega tindi asong ma song tindi chi tak go re se ngarang ka tini me jambala nga so jimba tari kong la khashi shayo ti jimba ju shayo ti jipote ne terang nyima chi pote la ne jimba jipote jin song osong jin duwe yang ngarang ka sem go na la nge me jan la tini jimba jipote tindi jin go samne tindi sam anduk munduk samne tini nga so mar nyewi ne kamna tini jigdum nyima chi kan jigdum de she go re.
So these two things are something we really need to give a lot of thought to. Every single day, at least several times, we need to think about them. We need to think about whether we gave rise to thoughts of benefiting others through generosity, and whether or not we actually undertook acts of giving, of generous giving to others. Of the 4 different types of generosity that we talked about this evening, did I, in the course of this day, give any of these types of generosity to others? Did I think about doing so? This is something that we need to reflect on, and at the end of each day.
Tini tindi goni nga so takshi pine kamna tini nga so kap sa tini nyima chikpo de la tini nam tok chikyang ma kiwa tindi yore tindi yona o tini soso rang la o ta nge terang drug ma song samne soso rang la kyunju chi gore nge drug ma song nge terang nyima chikpo de choklak tang jang de ngarang ka samba tindi ya po chikyang ki mandu samne tindi sam gore tini karte nga so jigdum shi pine kamna o terang ka nyima chikpo ti na la ngarang ka leka tindi kashi le yo yana sem ka na la tindi samlo ya po kashi yo na o tini soso rang la tini toba shine o ta njingdu ta yak bo rendu nge terang nyima chikpo te ton dang dang ba tini rendu samni tini sam go re.
So in reflecting on our thoughts and actions at the end of each day, if we find ourselves having just ended a day where we didn't give rise to really any single thought of benefiting another through generous giving, then we need to criticize ourselves. We need to see this as having wasted a day, wasted an opportunity to be generous by not giving rise to any kinds of positive thoughts. If, though, we reflect on the day that went before us and we recognize that, we did a few things to benefit others and we gave rise to a few positive thoughts, then we need to congratulate on ourselves on this and recognize that in so doing we just passed a day of meaning and purpose. So this brings us to the end of tonight's teaching.
Sonum de yi dam je zeng ba nian dam ne ni be da na ba je. Jirga na je wa long zheng bai. Zhe bim zo lin zhou wa zhou re shou. Oma a hong ban zeng ge re ba ma se de hong. Oma a hong ban zeng ge re ba ma se de hong. Oma a hong ban zeng ge re ba ma se de hong. Tu ji che, teni tsang mo la ta shi di le je.